I've never been good at fitting in. Not because I didn't try, God knows I tried, but because there's something about me that never quite aligned with what my family wanted me to be. Looking back now, I realize that my greatest strength was also what made me the family disappointment. I could see things differently. I questioned things. I refused to follow the script. My name is Marcus Chen, and this is the story of how being the black sheep of my family became the best thing that ever happened to me. I grew up in San Francisco with parents who had very specific ideas about success. My father, Robert Chen, was a surgeon. My mother, Helen, was a lawyer. My older sister, Jennifer, had become a doctor. My younger brother, David, was in his MBA program at Stanford. The family narrative was clear: prestigious education, prestigious career, prestigious life. There was no room for deviation. I was the deviation. At 14, I told my parents I wanted to drop out of piano lessons to learn how to code. Piano was a required accomplishment in the Chen family, a marker of cultural refinement and discipline. My parents saw coding as a hobby, a waste of time, a distraction from real education. "You can do both," my mother said, but her tone made it clear that coding shouldn't interfere with piano. I chose coding. Within 6 months, my parents had stopped asking how my programming projects were going. Within a year, they'd stopped mentioning it at all, as if that part of me didn't exist. In high school, while my siblings were taking SAT prep courses and applying to Ivy League schools, I was hacking websites, legally, for practice, building apps, and teaching myself everything I could about technology. My grades were good, but they weren't exceptional. My college essay was about why traditional education felt limiting. I got into UC Berkeley, which my parents treated like I'd been rejected from Harvard. "It's a good school," my father said, his voice carefully neutral in a way that suggested it wasn't actually good at all. "But not the best," my mother added. Berkeley felt like exile, but it was also liberation. Away from my family's expectations, I thrived. I fell in with a group of other tech obsessives, kids who saw problems in the world and immediately started thinking about how to solve them with code. We worked on projects together, took classes we actually cared about, and spent countless nights in the computer lab talking about ideas that felt genuinely revolutionary. But I also became the family embarrassment in ways that deepened over time. When I was 20, my parents came to campus for Parent Weekend. They visited my dorm room, a chaotic space filled with 3 monitors, equipment I'd collected, and papers covered in code. My mother looked around like she'd entered an alien spacecraft. "Is this sanitary?" she asked, pointing to a coffee cup that had been sitting on my desk for approximately 3 days. But the real tension came when they asked about my major. "Computer science," I said. My father set down his coffee cup. "Not physics? Not engineering?" "No, computer science." "Because that's what exactly?" Jennifer asked. She'd come along for the weekend, too, fresh off her first year of medical school, radiating success and purpose. "It's the study of computation, algorithms, software systems." "But it's not a real science," my mother said, and she genuinely believed this. "It's just sitting in front of a computer all day." "That's like saying medicine is just sitting in front of patients all day," I countered. "The medium isn't what matters. The problem solving is what matters." Jennifer laughed, not kindly. "You're not going to make real money doing that. Have you thought about law school? Your brain is good enough." That was the problem, I realized. My family didn't want me to be ambitious. They wanted me to be ambitious in the right ways, for the right reasons, following the right path. Deviation wasn't ambition. It was failure. After I graduated, I moved to a tiny apartment in San Jose and took a job at a mid-sized tech company. It paid $60,000 a year, which felt like a fortune to me, but was met with concern by my family. "Is that enough to live on?" my mother asked, genuinely worried. "It's enough to live on," I said. "Not enough to buy a house, but enough to live." "Your sister is already talking about buying property," Jennifer said during a family dinner. She'd said it casually, but the point was clear. Everyone else was winning, and I was just surviving. Over the next few years, I started showing up to fewer family events. Christmas, I'd have a work project. Thanksgiving, I'd taken on additional responsibilities. Family dinners? I'd be heads down on a startup project. It wasn't really a choice, though I told myself it was. The truth was that every time I was around my family, I felt the weight of their disappointment. I felt small. I felt like I was failing at something I'd never actually signed up for. My parents, for their part, seemed relieved. I noticed that their complaints about me to relatives seemed to decrease when I wasn't around. I became a convenient absence rather than a present failure. It was easier for everyone. When I was 25, I left my job to start a company with two friends, Sarah Kim, a brilliant designer, and Rajesh Patel, a business-minded engineer. We had an idea for a workflow automation platform, software that would help small businesses streamline their operations and save thousands in labor costs. I didn't tell my family for 3 months. When I finally mentioned it during a video call with my mother, she went silent. "You quit your job?" she asked finally. "I left to start a company," I corrected, though the distinction felt minor to her. "With what money?" This was from my father, who'd clearly been pulled into the call. "We pooled our savings and took a small seed investment from some angel investors." "And what's your salary?" "Nothing yet. We're not paying ourselves until we get Series A funding." My parents looked at each other through the camera in that way they did, a communication that had been perfected over decades of marriage. I could read it clearly. Their son was being irresponsible, self-destructive, naive. "Have you thought about getting a real job?" my mother asked gently, which somehow made it worse. "This is real," I said. "We have 5 clients already. We're generating revenue." 5 clients, my father repeated, as if I'd said 5 imaginary friends. I didn't call them again for 6 months. The thing about the tech industry is that timing and luck play enormous roles, but hard work matters too. We worked 16-hour days. Sarah was designing interfaces that were intuitive and beautiful. Rajesh was building the back-end infrastructure that made everything scalable. And I was writing the code that connected everything together and solving problems I didn't even know existed yet. By the end of year 2, we had 150 clients and were growing by 20% month over month. We closed a Series A funding round that valued the company at $50 million. Each of us got a small piece back as salary, finally. Suddenly, I could afford a nicer apartment. I could eat at restaurants that weren't Chipotle. I could breathe. By year 4, we had 5,000 clients and enterprise contracts with major corporations. We closed a Series B round at a $300 million valuation. Now I had real wealth. Not retire forever wealthy, but I had financial security. I had options. I had autonomy, and my family had no idea. It wasn't deliberate. I just hadn't told them. After years of their disapproval, after years of feeling like I was failing in their eyes, after years of their clear belief that what I was doing didn't matter, I'd stopped including them in my life. They didn't ask, and I didn't volunteer information. Jennifer knew a little bit because we ran into each other at a medical conference I was sponsoring in 2015, and she asked what I was doing these days. I gave her a vague answer about working in software. She'd already moved on to talking about her prestigious pediatric practice and her husband, who was a partner at a law firm. It was the first time I'd seen my sister in 3 years. Then, in 2017, we got acquired. A massive enterprise software company, the kind of company that moves markets and reshapes industries, decided our platform was exactly what they needed to expand their offerings. The acquisition price was $1.2 billion. My stake in the company, after accounting for dilution from funding rounds and employee equity, was worth approximately $180 million. I was 31 years old, and I was suddenly very, very wealthy. I didn't immediately tell my family because I needed time to process it myself. I spent 2 weeks just walking around San Francisco in a daze. I'd made it. I'd actually made it. Everything my family had dismissed, everything they'd told me wasn't viable, everything they'd expressed doubt about, it had worked. The vindication felt hollow, though. I realized that I'd been waiting for this moment to feel like triumph, but what I felt was mostly tired. Tired of needing their approval, tired of caring what they thought, tired of the space that their disappointment had taken up in my chest for so many years. I decided to tell them in person. I flew to San Francisco and asked them to meet me for dinner. It was a Saturday night in June. We met at a restaurant in their neighborhood, somewhere they'd chosen, which meant it was expensive and the kind of place where they knew the owner. My mother looked elegant and well-rested. My father looked distinguished in a way that only surgeons seem to manage. Jennifer was there too, which I hadn't expected, and she was perfectly put together in that way that successful women sometimes are, like they'd woken up that way. "This is nice," my mother said, looking at the menu. "What's the occasion?" "I wanted to tell you something," I said. "Something that's been happening for a while now." My father looked up from his menu. For a moment, I saw concern in his eyes. Maybe he thought I was sick. Maybe he thought I was in trouble. "I sold my company," I said. There was a pause. Jennifer was the first to respond. "You sold it? To who?" "Nexus Enterprise Solutions. They acquired us for $1.2 billion. I watched their faces process this information. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father set down his menu carefully. $1.2 billion, he repeated slowly. My stake in the company is worth approximately $180 million after accounting for the funding rounds and employee equity that had diluted the founder positions. Another silence. This one was longer. "That's..." My mother started, then stopped. "That's quite a lot of money." "It is," I agreed. "And you built this company? From the beginning?" This was Jennifer, and I could hear something in her voice that I'd never heard before. Respect, maybe, or perhaps just recalibration. "With 2 co-founders, yes. We started it in 2012. We just sold it." My father looked at me in a way I'd never quite seen him look at me before, like he was trying to reconcile the person he thought I was with the person I apparently had become. "I have to admit," he said carefully, "I didn't see this coming. When you quit your job to start a company, I thought you were making a mistake. I thought you were being reckless." "You said that," I confirmed. "And I was wrong," he said. The words seemed to cost him something. I was wrong. About that. It should have felt like a victory. This was what I'd been waiting for. The acknowledgement that they'd underestimated me, that their path wasn't the only path, that I'd made something of myself despite their doubts. But mostly, I just felt empty. "Congratulations," Jennifer said, and she reached over to squeeze my hand. "That's incredible. Really." "Thank you," I said. My mother ordered wine. "We should celebrate. What are you going to do now? Are you going to rest? Travel?" "I'm still working with Nexus," I said. "I signed a 5-year contract to help integrate our team and products into their infrastructure, so I'll be busy for a while." "But you'll be wealthy beyond measure," my mother said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I agreed. "I will be." And that's when the conversation shifted. It was subtle, like a door opening a crack. My parents started asking questions about the company. Real questions this time, not dismissive ones. What was our tech stack? How did we acquire customers? What was the market size? They were asking because they cared, but also because I'd suddenly become interesting to them in a way I hadn't been before. Dinner ended at around 9:30. As we were leaving, my mother hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she said. And I realized something devastating. She would have been proud of me 5 years ago, too, if I'd failed, if I'd needed her support. But she hadn't offered that. Instead, she'd offered doubt and disappointment. And now she was offering pride because I'd made money. I didn't know which was worse. After that dinner, things changed. My family started reaching out more frequently. My mother would call with no particular reason, just to chat. My father would email me articles about the tech industry that he thought I'd find interesting. Jennifer started messaging me regularly, and we even had lunch a few times. It was nice in a way. It was what I'd wanted for so long, to feel accepted, included, valued. But I was beginning to understand something important. They were valuing a version of me that didn't really exist. They were valuing a net worth, not a person. They were valuing the version of me that had finally succeeded according to their metrics. The real evidence of this came about 8 months after the acquisition at a family gathering for my father's 16th birthday. My parents had organized a dinner party, not at a restaurant this time, but at their home. About 40 people, extended family, friends from the hospital, colleagues of my mother's from her law firm. It was the kind of event my family threw to demonstrate their status and success. I was introduced not as my son Marcus, but as my son Marcus, who just sold his technology company for over $1 billion. It happened multiple times throughout the night. My achievement had become my identity in their circles. At one point, I overheard my father talking to a colleague. Yes, Marcus started a software company that revolutionized workflow automation. Just sold it for $1.2 billion. He's going to be set for life. I wasn't expecting him to say anything else. There was nothing else to say, really. That was the achievement. That was the accomplishment. That was the thing that had made me worthy of pride. But what struck me was that he didn't mention the coding I'd taught myself, the passion I'd brought to solving problems, the 10,000 hours of work that had gone into building something meaningful. He mentioned the number, because the number was the only language that translated to worth in his world. Later that night, my Uncle Michael pulled me aside. He was my father's younger brother, and we'd never been particularly close. "Congratulations on the sale," he said. And then, before I could respond, he added, "I'm actually looking to start a business. I was wondering if you might be interested in investing in something with real potential." And there it was, the other thing that suddenly made me valuable to my family, access to capital. "What kind of business?" I asked. "Commercial real estate development. I've been working with a partner for years, and we're finally ready to scale. We need about $5 million for the first phase." "I'm not really looking to invest in real estate right now," I said carefully. "Just think about it," he said, in a way that suggested I'd already committed to thinking about it very seriously. "I'll send you some materials. You might want to diversify beyond tech anyway." I never received the materials. A week later, my cousin Jennifer, my uncle's daughter, connected with me on LinkedIn and sent me a message saying she was starting a consulting firm and would love to talk about potential funding. The week after that, my mother mentioned in an offhand way that my cousin David was looking to go back to school, and the tuition was quite expensive, and she wondered if I might feel comfortable helping him out. I started to see a pattern. About 2 years after the acquisition, I had a realization that changed everything. I was at a family dinner. These had become more frequent since I'd become wealthy, and my mother was talking about some renovations they wanted to do to their house. The kitchen was outdated. The bathrooms needed work. It would cost about $300,000 to do properly. "That sounds nice," I said neutrally. "Well, yes," my mother said, and then she laughed in a way that was trying to be casual but wasn't. "It's silly, but we've been waiting. Your father and I were thinking maybe you could help with the cost, since you're in such a good financial position now." I looked around the table. My father was suddenly very interested in his plate. Jennifer was looking at her phone. David, my brother, who'd never been particularly warm to me, was watching this interaction with barely concealed interest. "I could," I said slowly, "but I won't." My mother blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you and Dad are both successful, wealthy people. You've built a life through your careers. I don't think it's appropriate for me to subsidize your lifestyle choices." "It's not subsidy," my father said stiffly. "It's family helping family." "Is it though?" I asked. "Because for the last decade, when I needed family support, emotional support, acceptance, understanding, it wasn't available. But now that I have money, suddenly I'm needed?" There was a very tense silence. "Marcus, that's not fair," my mother said. "We always loved you." "I never said you didn't," I replied. "But love and acceptance are different things. You didn't accept who I was or what I wanted to do until it resulted in financial success. And now that there's money involved, suddenly everyone wants to be close to me." "That's a harsh interpretation," Jennifer said. "We're proud of you." "You're proud of my bank account," I corrected. "That's different. And I've let it happen because part of me was still looking for your approval. But I'm 34 years old. I don't need your approval anymore, and I'm not going to bankroll the life you want to live just to prove that I'm successful." My father stood up from the table. "I won't be spoken to this way in my own house." "Then I'll leave," I said, standing up too. "But I want you all to understand something. I love you. I'm probably always going to love you because you're my family. But I'm not going to let myself be used because I made money, and I'm not going to pretend that the last 15 years didn't happen, All the times I was dismissed, doubted, treated like I was making bad decisions. Money doesn't erase that. It just makes it more obvious that the dismissal was never about my character or intelligence. It was about your expectations. I left that dinner and didn't attend another family gathering for 6 months. What happened next was interesting. My family didn't leave me alone, but the nature of the contact changed. My mother still called, but less frequently. My father sent fewer articles. Jennifer stopped trying to have lunch, but other family members emerged from the woodwork. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly appeared, with carefully constructed reasons to reconnect. An aunt I'd met perhaps 3 times in my life reached out with a story about financial difficulties. A second cousin asked if I was looking for meaningful investment opportunities in family enterprises. It was like watching predators identify a wounded animal. I did something I'd never really done before. I sat down and did the math on what my family had actually cost me emotionally, and I estimated how much therapy I'd spent on working through their expectations and disappointments. I calculated the years of achievement I could have pursued with confidence instead of shame. I added up all the moments I'd minimized myself to fit their narrative, and then I did something else. I started documenting every request, every half suggestion, every offhand mention of someone's financial need. I kept notes on who was reaching out and why. By the end of that 6-month period, I documented over 30 requests for money or investment, directly and indirectly. The total requested value was approximately $47 million. $47 million from the family that had spent my entire adult life treating me like I was making mistakes. I decided to have a conversation with my parents. Not an argument, not a confrontation, a conversation. I invited them to have lunch at my apartment in San Francisco, which was in a neighborhood they found interesting but slightly unsettling. Too much urban culture, too much diversity, not enough familiarity. I made lunch myself, nothing fancy, just good food. We sat at my dining table, which had a view of the San Francisco Bay. I wanted to talk about something that's been happening, I said, once we'd finished eating. My mother set down her fork. Of course. Since the company sold, I've received, directly or indirectly, approximately 30 requests for financial assistance or investment from family members. The total value of these requests is around $47 million. Okay. My father's face reddened. Marcus. I'm not finished, I said calmly. I'm not telling you this to shame you. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. I love you, and I always will, but I'm not going to be the solution to your family's financial problems. That's not what this is, my mother said, but her voice was uncertain. Then what is it? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the family that doubted me, dismissed me, treated my dreams like hobbies, suddenly wants access to the money those dreams generated. We were wrong about that, my father said quietly. I know we were wrong, but we were trying to protect you. The tech industry is risky. We didn't want to see you hurt. I know that's what you told yourselves, I said. And maybe on some level it was true. But the effect was the same. I spent 20 years feeling like I wasn't enough. Like what I wanted to do didn't matter. Like I was somehow less than my siblings because I took a different path. We didn't mean, my mother started. I know you didn't, but intent and impact are different things. And I've spent a lot of money on therapy understanding the impact. My father leaned back in his chair. So what are you saying? I'm saying that I'm happy to maintain a relationship with you, a real relationship, but I'm not going to be a bank for the family. I'm setting clear boundaries. I'm not giving money to relatives. I'm not investing in family business opportunities. I'm not subsidizing anyone's lifestyle. That's it. But what if someone has a genuine emergency? My mother asked. Medical bills? Job loss? Then they should come to me directly and ask, and I'll make a decision based on the actual situation, not out of obligation. But I won't be approached indirectly. I won't have cousins reaching out on LinkedIn with thinly veiled business opportunities. I won't have aunts mentioning financial challenges that someone else is facing. If someone needs help, they ask me directly and honestly. And if they don't agree to these terms? My father asked. Then we maintain cordial contact but limited relationship, I said. I'll attend major family events if I'm invited, but I won't be seeking out family connection. My parents left that lunch looking shaken. They didn't argue with me, didn't try to negotiate. They just accepted what I'd said and left. What happened next surprised me. My parents actually listened. My mother called me a week later and apologized. Not for everything. That would have been too neat, too complete. But for specific things. For not believing in my company. For letting their fears show as disappointment. For not asking me about my life in ways that suggested they actually cared what I was doing. "I want to know about your work," she said. "The actual work. Not because of money, but because you spend so much time on it. It must matter to you." We started having real conversations after that. My mother would ask about the challenges I was facing integrating with Nexus. My father would ask about the decisions I was making about my wealth. Jennifer, perhaps feeling called out herself, started reaching out with genuine interest rather than thinly veiled requests. And something remarkable happened. The family dynamic actually improved. Not perfectly. Family is never perfect, but noticeably. My Uncle Michael still wanted the real estate investment. My cousin Jennifer still wanted business funding. But my immediate family, my parents, my siblings, stepped back from the transactional dynamic and tried something different. They tried actually being interested in me as a person. It wasn't a happy ending in the way that movie happy endings are. It was more complicated than that. We didn't magically overcome 2 decades of misunderstanding, but we did establish something new, respect and clearer boundaries. It's now 2022, and my life looks very different from what I imagined it would when I was a burned-out software engineer thinking my family would never understand me. I'm not working at Nexus anymore. I left after my 5-year contract ended. I've started a venture capital fund that invests in early-stage software companies founded by people from non-traditional backgrounds. People like me. People who didn't follow the expected script but had brilliant ideas anyway. My fund has raised $250 million and has already invested in 47 startups, 12 of which have had successful exits. 2 of my investments went public last year, and the fund is now worth several $billions. I never did help my parents renovate their kitchen, but I did buy my mother a professional-grade kitchen in my own home, and I invite them over to cook with me twice a month. I never invested in my uncle's real estate development, but I did help him get a meeting with someone from my fund's network who was actually interested in the project. I never gave my cousin David money for tuition, but when he decided he genuinely wanted to go back to school to study education policy, I agreed to help fund that. The difference is that now these things are based on actual connection and genuine interest, not obligation or guilt. My relationship with my family isn't perfect. My father still makes occasional comments about how he wishes I'd gone to medical school. My mother still gets a slightly wistful look when Jennifer talks about her work at the hospital. David, my brother, moved to Seattle, and we still don't talk much. But Jennifer and I have become genuinely close. We grab coffee once a month and actually talk about our lives. My parents come to my industry events and seem genuinely proud of what I'm building. My mother has even become interested in tech investing and asked me for advice on understanding market trends. More importantly, I've stopped needing their validation. That was the real shift. When I finally decided that I didn't need them to confirm my worth, our relationship actually became real. It became based on something other than expectation or obligation. People often ask me if I have any regrets about how I handled my family. Do I wish I'd been softer? Do I wish I'd tried harder to maintain connection before the money happened? The honest answer is no. I needed to establish my boundaries. I needed to stop performing success for an audience that would only accept a specific type of success. And I needed to prove to myself, not to them, to me, that I could build something meaningful without their approval. The money was validation, yes, but not the kind I actually needed. The real validation came from inside, from knowing that I'd trusted my instincts, followed my passion, and created something that helped real people solve real problems. If my family had supported me unconditionally from the beginning, that validation might have meant something different. But because they didn't, I had to learn to validate myself. And honestly, that's been worth more than the $1.2 billion. Is it sad that it took money for them to see my value? Sure. But it's also freed me. Because now I know that their opinion of me, whether positive or negative, isn't something I need to base my life on. I'm still the black sheep in some ways. I'm not a doctor or a lawyer. I don't fit the traditional mold. But now, that's not a failure. It's just who I am. And I'm good with that. The true rags to riches story wasn't about the money. It was about going from poverty of spirit, doubting myself, seeking validation, to richness of spirit, about building a life that felt authentic and meaningful, about learning to trust myself. The money was just the thing that finally made everyone else see what I'd always known, that I was worth something. Now I just don't need them to tell me.